students. Today we are going to look at a new chapter on media and society. So we will start this chapter from looking at what society actually is, then eventually look at what culture is and the different components of culture. Eventually, we end this chapter with looking at why research or social research is important in terms of society and culture. So let us start with understanding how society was formed. Human beings from the very beginning of time realized that staying together in groups is very efficient and helpful. For that reason, in different parts of the world, as humans started living in collectivities and groups, there started emerging different practices on a daily basis. Now, these practices took a very important form eventually when they were passed on from generations. So if we were to define what society is, we can say it's a congregation or a group of people living together, having common geographical location, common habits, common cultures, common traits. Now then here you might ask, then what do I mean by culture? All those daily practices that we have as a part of our lives form a part of culture. But there are some technical definitions and technical criteria which help us understand what culture is. So first let us look at the different types of culture. These regular habits, if you all know, have different categories. Some of these habits are more abstract. They cannot be seen with our eyes. These form part of non-material culture. And some of these habits form a very solid physical presence in our lives. These form part of material culture. So now we have two forms of culture, which is material culture and non-material culture. So material culture, say, would be a cricket bat which you use to play cricket. But the rules and regulations of cricket, at what point when would you hit a four, or at what point would there be a googly, are those aspects of non-material culture which govern the game of cricket. Now further, we can distinguish culture into four aspects or types. The first is cultural traits. Now cultural traits form the central aspect of culture or the central platform of culture. These are more or less the physical aspects of culture which we follow on a day-to-day basis. These help further strengthen and regulate how we behave in our everyday lives. And later on, we would be seeing that there are norms or normative systems which govern these cultural traits. Now, if we move on, then we see something called subculture. Now, what would you think is a subculture? A subculture is a semi-part of the culture. It's a culture or it's a group of followings or traditions and norms within the larger cultural setting. So say if you have a larger music genre, there would be subcultures within that music genre, say pop or rock or Bollywood, which we all are very popular, say pop or rock or Bollywood, which we all are very familiar with, right? So subcultures then are further groupings in a larger culture. There are always some form of deterrence or any form of deviance from what is regularly followed, because not every person would agree to all the things that are said in society. In such cases, we look at the concept of counterculture. Usually, very young people, mostly young people, it might also be older people who do not agree with the majority opinion or who feel that they are being left out or their positions or their importance is not being valued as a part of larger culture, are forming countercultures. If you look at the definition of the word, they're countering culture. So it's kind of a rebellious setup within the larger culture whereby they try to establish that their culture or their practices are as important. Now moving on from traits to subculture to counterculture, we look at cultural integration. The most important aspect of culture is that it binds people together. So these practices and these regular habits are those important things which bind us on a daily basis. So hence, it forms a sense of unity and community which we fall back upon. But such a huge system of traditions or practices needs to be balanced or regulated in some way or the other. So then we look at the norms or the practices which are central to culture. We start with the aspect of folkways. So we practice certain things on a daily basis, say brushing our teeth or eating different meals at different points of time, praying, sleeping. These regular practices, which we have been following generation after generation without much thought or much question to it, are known as folkways. So again, if you look at the term, it's the ways of folk life or people's life. Now, certain folkways get more importance and relevance than other folkways. So, these folkways then are called mores. Why? Because these have been passed on over generations and they seem to be existing in and by themselves. So, we feel that we have no position or we have no power in front of these mores. It is because such mores are central and important to our lives. Say, for example, the fact that we have to eat 3 meals a day. We might not be hungry at times, but still, when our parents or our family gathers around for different meal times, we come and join them. We might eat very little, but we still join them. So, it's out of habit that we practice these mores. Now, further on, some mores become very important. Why? Because it might hurt or offend someone. As a part of culture, as a part of a larger group, humans have always realized that we need to maintain harmony. In order to do so, we have created a sense of right and wrong. What are those practices which are correct and what are those practices which are incorrect? So then, in order to maintain that sense of right and wrong, we tend to create a sense of morality around them. So if you do something incorrect, which is majorly opposed by society, say for example stealing. Stealing is taking away someone's property or someone's hard work without recognition. So that is seen as a form of manipulating or being biased towards someone. Hence, it is seen as a criminal offense. And because there is a sense of punishment associated with it, hence humans would not perform any acts of stealing or think twice before they even think of stealing. These mores are hence known as laws. And laws, as you know, are a very central part of our lives. Further on, laws are governed and regulated by institutions. Certain bodies, like say for example, the executive or the legislature of a government are present because they need to maintain harmony in society. So these laws then are controlled or maintained and implemented, say, on a day-to-day basis by certain acts or institutions of the government. And it's not only the government. Religion is a kind of an institution. Our family is a kind of an institution, because these institutions also teach us how to behave on a daily basis in our houses, right, in society. Now we would be looking at a quiz. So, the first quiz question, let me read it out. What are the two forms of culture? The first one, material and sentimental, norms and traditions, material and non-material, or none of the above. Okay, now students, let us look at why we were suddenly talking about society and culture. We have established the fact that society is a group of individuals and culture are those practices that these individuals follow on a day-to-day basis. Now we would also understand that with a difference in geographical locations or a difference in different parts of the world, there comes different types of culture. So now we need also to understand why society and culture are central and important to the study of sociology, and eventually how is it related when we are also looking at media studies. So, society and culture form central aspects of the discipline of sociology. Sociology tries to understand how culture regulates society and how society keeps on forming new aspects of culture. So, if in any location we suddenly have an increase in a set of laws and legality or mores, or there is a downfall of any society in any location, those are the aspects of sociology that we would want to study and know, because knowing such aspects would help us in understanding how society is behaving, and it would also help us in the future to know and prevent what kind of tensions in society we can prevent. If certain tensions arise, then how can we control such tensions and bring peace amongst different kinds of people? Hence, culture and knowing different types of culture and knowing the fact that culture would be different for different groups is very important, which is also the domain of sociology. Now, in order to understand how do we continue with culture or why is culture important for society, social research has been used. But before going on to social research, we would be taking another quiz. Let us look at the question. What are the different norms of culture? Again, we have four options. The first is folkways, mores, institutions and laws. The second is folkways and mores. The third is mores and laws. And the last one is institutions only. Try to solve it. The next aspect of the module that we are going to look at is why social research is important in terms of culture and society. Now, first, we need to also understand what we do in terms of social research. Research, as you see the word itself, is researching something. So, already a certain kind of knowledge and information is available, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to add more to it or re-look at the existing forms of knowledge. Now, research, when it is concerned with society, is something a little difficult to conduct. Research is primarily inspired by sciences. Sciences have a very fixed kind of an atmosphere. It is very easy to control the setting under which natural sciences, say physics, chemistry, biology, such sciences operate. But when it comes to human beings are different creatures. As we've already discussed, that we all have our different traditions, mores, folkways. Our way of life is different from each other. Hence, we need to then be a little cautious and careful as to how we are conducting research. Now, we would also look at who are the people who conduct social research. It can be scientists, as in social scientists, it can be students, it can be business organizations, large and small scale, which try to look at human behavior. Now, what would they be trying to find out from doing research? What are they researching? The first thing that research or social science research looks at is the difference in human behavior. As society has progressed, the life of humans has also progressed. Now we have a very technology-centric life. So how has this change taken place? How have you also adapted to this change? That is a very central question in social research. Students perform social research in order to understand a particular phenomenon. Say, for example, the flood in one particular village in a state that you live. How has the flood been undertaken, or how has it been tackled by the government? How have the people reacted to the government's tackling of the situation? How have the people responded to the aid that the government has provided? whether it has been provided correctly or not. These questions would be looked at by social science students. And you yourself can also undertake a very simple research in order to understand such behavior. Now we come to businesses. Why would businesses be interested in research? In order to understand consumer behavior. A consumer is someone who buys products, who buys services, say for example tailoring, say for example house cleaning, say for example all the products that you buy from a supermarket. These are consumer products. Now, businesses, in order to understand how humans would react to a new product that they are launching in the market, would do social research. That would help them to apprehend the kind of response and the kind of sales that they might have. Now, all this talk about social research also needs to be validated by a kind of framework. We cannot just conduct social research in thin air. There has been years and years of disciplining in terms of social research. So there are certain fundamental options and fundamental criteria which guide social research. So let us now look at the framework for that. The very first thing that we look at in terms of social research is ontology. This term is very unique in itself. So ontology is something which comprises of the assumptions that we have about society. When you cross the road, you assume that the traffic is going to be at a standstill, hence you cross the road. When people are driving on the road, they assume that the pedestrians are not going to jaywalk, hence they confidently drive on the road. These assumptions that we have automatically about society form our information about the kind of knowledge we look at. Now, next we look at something called epistemology, and there might be a chance of confusing with ontology, but let us try to clarify that. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge. So the assumptions that you have made have to be inspired by something, whether they are inspired by human behavior or whether they are inspired by a very strong factual scientific behavior. Cause and effect. That is what epistemology in a research tells us. So research is guided by these first two fundamental steps of ontology, the assumptions about your surroundings that you have, and epistemology, the theory of knowledge which are fed by the assumptions that you have. So you see the connection between ontology and epistemology. Now next we come at physically actually undertaking the research. That is methodology. So you would be utilizing certain kinds of tools in order to gather information. Why would you be using that particular tool and not all of the 4 or 5 different options that are available to you? Methodology helps us understand how we utilize tools and which tools are appropriate for each specific social research topic. Say for example, if we were to look at a large scale feedback of a particular product, we would be using a questionnaire whereby you would hand it out to different people. They would be ticking the option that they are acquainted with. That is inspired by methodology, which leads us to the final step of social science research, which is method. Now, when we are undertaking the research on a ground level, when we are talking to participants, when we are talking to human beings, we are actually taking a kind of a tool. So are we talking to them in depth about their experiences, or are we handing them out a questionnaire where they can fill in their answers? These actual tools, which we call in research, guide us in terms of how we are going to come to the outcome of the research, and they are guided by the methodology of research. So now you see the connection between the 4 different aspects of research. Ontology guides your assumptions. Epistemology tells you whether those assumptions are correct or not for the research at hand. Methodology tells you how you can utilize methods or what kind of methods would be appropriate. And finally, the method which you use in order to collect information. So now we have a good overview of social science research. Now let us come to the third quiz that we have. Folkways have become laws. Now this is a statement which you have to write whether it's true or false. The first option is true. The second is false. The third is related, that they are related. And the fourth is they are part of each other. That's a tricky one, isn't it? So now, let us look at what are the things that we covered in this module and conclude. So we started with what is a society, how society was formed by different forms of or different types of human beings. Then eventually, when human beings started living together, we come to the aspect of culture, which is our everyday habits. We looked at the different aspects or components of culture, cultural traits, subcultures, countercultures, and then eventually integration in terms of culture. Then we looked at the different norms that we have which regulate our culture, which is different for different kinds of societies. Then we looked at the different kinds of norms that we have in terms of culture, which is different for different societies. And eventually, through the usage of norms such as folkways, mores, laws, and institutions, we come to the conclusion that society is an interconnected space. Now then, why do we need to look at culture and society? In order to understand how we can sustain in harmony in terms of a society. We are different people from different places, no? Hence, we need a strong sense of what the future holds for us. So, in order to understand what the future holds for us, we can use social research. Then we looked at the different aspects which guide the framework of social research and how you also, as students, can conduct social research. I hope overall you've had an enriching experience through this specific module. We would be looking into more details in the next module. Thank you.